Give me a nod or a thumbs up if you can. Okay, good, good. That's wonderful. All right. So, first, I also want to thank you all for being so vulnerable and sharing those personal stories. And I know that there are different backgrounds here, but all of you are helping professionals. And yeah, in this day and age, and as we get older, we're all faced with our own loss. And so, what I'm going to share today is an overall framework and the trauma sensitive practices you can use with death and non death loss. But in the back of your mind, or maybe actually in the front of your mind, I want you to carry with you that this isn't just something you deliver to other people. It's really important to me that the people that I certify and that myself, that we are walking the talk and that we are applying this to our own grief. That is the first thing to do, is to take care of yourself. So as I go through this, some of it might resonate with you personally. And I really feel that if we embody the tools ourselves, if we're doing them and applying it to our own loss, we can show up so much more authentically to our clients. And it gives us that common humanity piece that's so important in adapting to life after loss. So if you are new to me, I am Heather Stang, and I'm the founder of the Mindfulness and Grief Institute and the creator of the Mindfulness and Grief System. My background is in thanatology. I have a master's degree in that, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. I mentioned ADEC. I won last year. I was very honored to win the Association for Death Education and Counseling Clinical Practice Award, which was both for my work on non-death loss with Dr. Harris and also on the mindfulness and grief system. So it's about innovation in grief therapy, basically. But I'm also a yoga therapist, a mindfulness teacher, an author, and somebody who experienced loss at a very early age. When I was 7, my uncle Doug died by suicide. And while I often joke that I still wanted to be a ballerina after that, it was definitely that experience of losing my only remaining uncle, only remaining other relative other than my parents and grandparents, and watching both my parents, who had each lost a sibling. My dad's my dad's brother died when I was an infant, and watching my grandparents go through the loss of a child. My whole ecosystem growing up was a grieving one. And there was a very real change that I will say, even as a child, but I will also say, especially as a child, because children tend to absorb things in ways adults don't understand. It is obviously the seed that got planted that leads me to do this work. And it was while I was studying thanatology and I was already a yoga therapist, I started volunteering on the National Suicide Lifeline in the hopes of really preventing people from going through what my family did, that I discovered that was my meaning reconstruction, a word I didn't have at the time, but that we use in death education and grief counseling all the time. So that work was really important to me. And it's, of course, a much longer story that leads to creating the mindfulness and grief system that involves putting together the ancient practices that I learned as a meditator and as a yogi with the principles of thanatology. So it's always important for me to say that while I did create the mindfulness and grief system and put all these things together in an order that works, that is also based on interviews that I did with grieving people who had gone through my 8-week yoga and meditation for grief program, that these practices are ancient and that I did not invent mindfulness and yoga. I know you all know that, but I don't want to be one of those people where they're like, she thinks she invented this. I didn't. These things helped me through. In fact, it was these practices that broke my suppressed grief open and forced me to actually work through it. And I say that in a very loving way. So, up on the screen is a visual of the mindfulness and grief system. And at its heart, it is a structured but flexible approach to grief support. And that balance is really important because one of the challenges of grief work is that too much structure can feel invalidating, rigid, or like it doesn't have space for people to feel the way they really feel. And the flexibility is important because each person's grief is as unique as the relationship they have with the person that died or the thing that they lost. And this is why in family systems, we can see a parent die and there's 5 children left, and all 5 of them grieve and have different aspects to their grief because it's special, it's personal. And so I wanted to create something that is the best of both worlds that can give practitioners something where we know what to do when a certain symptom or complaint or problem or even joy or what's the word I want to say? Achievement, which is a weird word, but when people start to realize, oh, I can take care of my body and get some rest. I have learned how to talk to my sister and not scream at her anymore because I understand she's grieving her way, or those little things. We want to also be able to honor those too, right? So that's what this system is designed to do, is create that balance between structure and flexibility. And the theoretical grounding of this, I mentioned the ancient practices of Buddhism and Hinduism, and it is very much informed by the pioneers in thanatology. I'll only mention one right now because I want to make sure we have time to go through everything. But the most important one up here for me, as far as how the system works, they're all equally important, is Dr. William Worden's 4 tasks of mourning. Those include, the first task is to accept the reality of the loss, which is simply the fact that the loss has happened. It's not that weird acceptance word that gets tossed around and makes grieving people feel completely diminished. The second task is to cope with the pain of the loss. The third task is to adapt to your world, like your daily life, the dishes, picking up the kids, paying the bills without that person around. And that includes internal adaptations too, as well as spiritual adaptations. And then finally to embark on your new life, this changed life, while maintaining an enduring connection with the person who died. And so this is about transforming into who am I now, but honoring that we don't have to relinquish the relationship. Now, I do address challenging relationships because not everybody had an easy relationship with the person who died. There's obviously scenarios of abuse, betrayal, things like that. And so finding what to keep and what to let go of in a relationship is a big part of the work that people do, as well as reparenting. And then finally, a big part of this system is trauma sensitive mindfulness, which has really been fleshed out by Dr. David Trelevin. And I'll talk about him in a moment. But first, mindfulness is not something that we can just expect everybody to do. If someone is not feeling safe, staying present is probably not going to work for them. And so when we're working with people who are grieving or who have experienced trauma, it's very helpful to understand this window of tolerance, which is a framework by Dan Siegel. So if someone's overwhelmed or dysregulated, asking them to close their eyes and go inward or sit with intense sensations can actually be really unhelpful, and it can cause more harm. If they are feeling shut down or numb or dissociated, then it's not going to work either. And so part of the system is helping people recognize that, re-regulate using a variety of different methods, which is going to be different for individuals depending on the scenario, but to also approach teaching them in a very permissive, open, an empowering way. So rather than saying you should meditate, we need to get more information and let it be an invitation. So, very briefly, this is Dr. David Treleaven's work. We do a whole week on this in the certification program, and I highly recommend his book, Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, as a companion, or if you're going to be teaching mindfulness to anybody who is dysregulated or really any human. And so a lot of professionals do have understandable concerns about using mindfulness with grieving people, but it can also be incredibly healing. And so Dr. Treleaven's work helps us how to offer it in a way that has safety, choice, and empowerment. And there are these three principles. What I just said, letting it be an invitation, recognizing that trauma can be both helped by presence, it can also be aggravated by presence, and also understanding that presence is something that can be titrated. We might help people focus on just one thing in the moment rather than all the things. And you'll see that in my system. And I've got his 5 principles there: prioritizing safety before we ask people to sit still, offering choice and agency, balancing interoception, which is awareness of what's happening internally, physical sensations and emotions, with grounding things outside of us like sound, smell, sight, recognizing that the body is both a healer and a trigger, which is a very important nuance, and recognizing that healing begins in relationship and we need to be culturally aware of how mindfulness is going to impact someone. So cultural sensitivity is really important. At the end of the day, we don't want to be causing more trauma as we're trying to heal it. That's a big part of it, right? So that leads us into the very first step, which I call conscious relaxation because it's a nice term. The idea is that we're teaching people to choose to release the areas that they can where there might be intention, some tension, and we're really seeking to balance the nervous system, taking people out of dysregulation. Grief is not just emotional, it's physiological. And a lot of our clients will arrive anxious, activated, restless, unable to sleep, unable to think clearly. And because we're going to eventually ask people to reflect deeply, journal, process emotions, sit in stillness, we first have to help them regulate. So the main practices here are actually about focusing attention on just one thing. And it's really interesting. The research by Dr. Herbert Benson shows that by focusing on something like a repetitive word, which we call a mantra, or counting, or paying attention to how your feet are hitting the floor over and over again, that actually can take people out of the fight, flight, freeze response and put them into a state that he coined as the relaxation response. So this is regulating, and it's the first thing we do with people is we just help them focus on one thing. And the big takeaway is they don't have to stay focused, that if they get distracted, they just can begin again and the benefits will still happen. All the practices in here are not about doing them perfectly. It's about understanding the control you have over your attention and starting again and again. And so I like to think of conscious relaxation and focused awareness as a flashlight and mindfulness as more like a lantern or a floodlight. So as we move into mindfulness, here is where we help people become more present with what is actually happening instead of getting pulled into rumination about the past or anxiety about the future. This is what I call time traveling. We all do it. We're somewhere else other than now. And it makes sense that grief would pull us through time into memories, regrets, fears, or that imagined future that no longer exists. And so when we teach people to connect with the part of them that is aware, and you can do this right now, I'll do it right now. Just connecting with the part of you that is aware that you are aware. And right there, you've opened up your attention to noticing more than your thoughts. But if it feels unsafe to be in that big space, we teach people they can oscillate back to the conscious relaxation practices. So in steps 1 and 2, we're teaching people attention control and choice. Where do you want to be? Do you need to be focused and safe and protect yourself from the thoughts and the emotions? Or do you want to be open so that you can actually hold and reflect on your grief? Because grief isn't just all that pain, grief is intertwined with love. And we can't shut ourselves off from just one thing without shutting ourselves off from everything. But then the biggest piece of all, perhaps, is teaching people how to be kind to themselves during this process. And while step 3 is called compassion for all, it's really about self-compassion. Honestly, this is one of the most powerful parts of the work because grief is painful enough on its own, but so often we add suffering by self-criticism and self-judgment. And some of the things I hear often in grief is, I should be doing this better. I should be stronger. I don't know why I can't focus at work. What's wrong with me? And then the inevitable person who doesn't know any better that comes up to them and says, I don't understand why you're still going through this. Which, while the grieving people I know, and myself included, might innately know that's not okay and that's not true, there can still be a little part of us that goes, yeah, why am I not over this? It's been a year, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years. But we know grief doesn't have a timeline and it's not linear and it's messy and we don't know when it's going to show up. So self-compassion helps us interrupt those thoughts and reframe them and to meet ourselves with the same kindness we would naturally offer someone else. And of course, compassion is something that can help us deepen our connection to other people. And sometimes it's easy to cut yourself off from support when you're grieving. It's hard to receive support, or maybe there's some friction between you and a family member. And so working with compassion there can sometimes allow people to understand, I'm having my experience, they're having their experience, but we love each other and we can find some common ground. And one of the most powerful practices for this, other than really doing a full on compassion meditation practice that can be done on the spot, is to just place your hand on your heart and take a breath and say, this is hard. This is hard. And if you feel like it, which some people do and some people don't, and I'm doing my best. This is hard and I'm doing my best. Right there, there's no expectation to be different. There's an acceptance of how hard grief is. Teaching people that is a superpower. The 4th step is skillful courage. And this is where we help people change their relationship with difficult emotions because we usually either suppress them, power through them, or become completely overwhelmed by them. But skillful courage offers a different path. It teaches us how to approach emotional pain with both a steadiness and compassion, and lets us recognize that vulnerability is not a weakness, that grief takes enormous courage, and it's not the kind that is pretending to be fine. And it's not something we want to have. A lot of people who are bereaved feel really, what's the word I'm looking for? Irritated when someone comes up and says, oh, but you're so strong. You're doing so well. You're so strong. What happens when I fall apart? Or then am I doing bad? I don't want to be strong. I did not choose this. And so skillful courage is about addressing that we do have to be strong, even though we don't want to be, and that it is okay to hide under the covers and have a good cry, that all of this is welcome and all of this is very human. So it's not about seeing emotions as enemies to fight or to transcend, but to look at difficult emotions as messengers carrying information that deserves attention and care. One of the practices we do here is really turning to the somatic experience of emotions and how they land in our body rather than going into our mind to try to fix the emotions, but to actually mindfully tend to and be with. And if anybody is familiar with the meditation called RAIN, it's an acronym RAIN. We work with that one here and also in the next step, which is called getting unstuck. Getting unstuck is not because people are literally stuck. Only a small percentage of people get diagnosed with prolonged grief disorder, which is a kind of stuckness that can show up usually when there are other things present, like addiction or other mental health concerns. And it is controversial in our field because some people are like, grief is grief. Also, when they first came up with that term, the time frame was given as 6 months, which isn't a really long time in the grief world. But I will say that for the small percentage of people that I have seen with prolonged grief disorder, there is something that feels very different about their grief. It does feel like it gets worse and worse and worse and worse over time. And in my experience, those people have had other mental health concerns or addictions that also needed to be addressed simultaneously. But the majority of people who show up for a mindfulness and grief group, because it's called a mindfulness and grief group, they self-selected that they're people who want to work on their grief. They're willing to actually take some action, not always, but that doesn't mean that they don't feel stuck. Time flies when you're having fun. When you're miserable, one day can feel like an eternity, and that's what grief is like. So I want to be really clear that grief can sometimes create patterns that can loop our suffering, but that is actually fairly normal. That can lead to rumination, avoidance, self-doubt, restlessness, emotional shutdown. And what I want to do is help people move through that as quickly and easily as possible without disenfranchising the pain of the loss. So, the types of practices we use in getting unstuck are alternative point of view writing and artistic expression, art and writing instead of writing from I, me, my, writing as though you're outside of yourself, maybe as a benevolent being, you are writing in the third person where you're the hero on the hero's journey is incredibly powerful for people because it gives them a little bit of space and distance from what they're actually going through, where they can actually see themselves, see their growth, see what they're having to navigate and be like, oh, this person deserves kindness. Expressive arts such as collage or drawing a griefscape help tap into the subconscious and sometimes give meaning and imagery to something words can't describe. And we also use some classic Buddhist practices here. And by the way, you don't have to use anything Buddhist and you don't have to say it's Buddhist. The Buddhists want us to use these practices to reduce suffering. And while I practice Buddhist light, we do want to acknowledge where these things come from, but also acknowledge that they are tools that are to be used by anyone. So I like the 5 mental hindrances here, which are the states of mind that block presence for all of us. And there's a practice that I offer that we can work with these through. RAIN works great. But I will say probably 95% of the time, I'm using these expressive arts, letter writing, things like that to help people get unstuck. Continuing bonds, I mentioned earlier, this is about the connection to the person who died. And if you're wondering why it's way down at step 6 out of 8 instead of early on, they're going to be talking about their person throughout. It's not they feel like they can't, but this is where we really spend time nurturing the connection that remains. But they have now in their pocket all these other tools to help them regulate, to help them see the bigger picture, to help them be kind to themselves, to handle difficult emotions. And when we're grieving, and you've all probably experienced it, I certainly have, when you have a loss, you tell that same story over and over, and that's a part of it. But here in Continuing Bonds, we teach people how to approach the story in a different way and how to start seeing that relationship as continuing, but in a new form. And that might be by noticing the imprint that the person had on multiple areas of our lives, our mannerisms, our hobbies, our career, our worldview, our politics, our religion. It might help us find a way to stay connected to them every day. It helps them learn how to handle grief anniversaries, which can be very hard. I have a worksheet that I give out called it's the death anniversary planner. And because a lot of times the somatic symptoms of an anniversary will show up way before the anniversary itself, giving people something to do a couple months ahead of an anniversary helps ease that anxiety because they feel more in control. But the big takeaway of this is love lives on. It does not end. Yes, we miss them. Yes, in most cases, people still want them here, but it's not at all unhealthy to nurture that bond, as Freud wanted us to believe back in the day, as some people still think is the case, but we know it is an important part of our adaptation to life after loss. And then I'll say finally, there is an eighth step, but this is the final contemplative piece, and this is allowing transformation in ourselves. And I want to be really clear about what this does and does not mean. This is not about finding a silver lining or forcing gratitude or suggesting that loss happens for a reason. Although I do believe we find reasons after a loss that help us go on. And that's what meaning reconstruction is. And so it's not about minimizing pain, but recognizing that grief changes us. And some things we don't have control over, but we can look at our values that come from the relationship with the person who died, our own desires and hopes and dreams, and we can try to start pointing ourselves towards an integrated identity that is, who do I want to be now? What matters to me now? And this step creates space for people to reflect on, who am I becoming as I carry love and loss forward? So it honors growth alongside of grief rather than saying grief leads to growth. So finally, the last step is called perpetual mindfulness, because grief and our own self-care through grief is not something we just check off and leave behind. It's part of our ongoing human experience. And so by this point, we're starting to help our clients and ourselves think about what sustainable support looks like moving forward. What do they have that helps them stay steady or come back after a wave of grief? What helps them care for themselves day to day that is realistic and meaningful? And so this is an important step because it doesn't have an end date. It is ongoing, even though the intensity and the duration and frequency of difficult emotions might get a little more spaced out. You could be 10, 20 years down the road and something comes on the radio or an event happens that has you feeling like you're back in day one. And we also want to normalize that here as well, giving people hope that they can still live fully while also honoring the reality that it's not going to go away completely. Neither will the love. And then for my professionals, I always think it's really important to include this understanding that regulation is relational before it's individual, and our clients borrow our nervous system. And so there's also that piece that you are also all humans, and I am too. And we deserve to be happy and safe and free from suffering, just like we want our clients to be. And so I don't see us as any different. We might have walked the walk before, we might have learned some skills, but we are all equally human. And so our presence matters, and your presence is part of the intervention. And so ethically, I think it's super important that we put our own well-being first, which I know there's a lot of memes and talk about that, but putting it into practice, it's something that I really strongly try to empower everybody to do. And it shows up in my students who go through the coaching program. And I'll share a couple insights from you there in a moment. But my favorite Heather daily check in to make sure I am taking care of myself and that I can show up for myself and my clients in a healthy way is this simple journaling prompt. Good morning, Heather. What do you need today? And I do that after my meditation practice, which some days is 5 minutes and some days it's 50 minutes. But I always ask myself that. And some days it's simple. You need to remember to eat lunch today. Remember yesterday you didn't eat till 4 and how awful you felt. And other days it's you need to schedule a therapy session. And other days it's make sure you get outside and walk with your dog. It could be anything. But the practice is checking in with me every day. And that's also a practice I want to give to my clients as well. So this comes from a current student in my program, except for she just passed her exam this morning. I just sent her certificate. So she is now a certified mindfulness and grief coach. But I loved what she shared when I asked for feedback. Personally, this program helped me shift from just doing mindfulness to actually living it. I pause more and react less, especially during stressful moments. Professionally, it changed how I think about holding space, less fixing, more allowing, and trusting the process. That is at the heart of this. That is how I want to show up. And whether you're interested in my certification program or not, as I said earlier, this is for everybody. I hope that lands for you as well. And I hope that inspires you. So I'm going to briefly talk about the certification program, and then we'll have open time for questions and answers that can be about grief. It can be about the system, it can be about the program. It's for whatever. So I just wanted to give you a list. I'm not going to read through all of them right now because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A. But basically, if you're someone who wants a clearer framework for your grief work, for your professional grief work, supporting people, so you don't feel like you're reinventing the wheel every time someone comes to you, or you don't have that client sitting in front of you who is presenting with something and you're like, I'm not sure how to help, which sometimes helping is just staying silent and listening for sure. And our own mindfulness practice can help us get comfortable with that discomfort. If staying ethical and trauma informed and working within your scope matters to you, this is very much for you. If you want tools you can use and not just theory. As a thanatologist, I'm coming out of an academic background where there's a lot of research and studies and best practices. But what this does is it gives you things to do to put those best practices into shape. So another one from someone is, this isn't a script to memorize, it's a way of being. And that is very personal. This came from Carol Gallagher Jackson, who is a grief counselor, and I'm still working with her. She's stayed in the ongoing post. We have a coaches circle that you can do after the certification. I get to see her put this into practice every day. And really after the program, you'll be able to facilitate 8-week sessions. You'll be able to work with grieving clients, and that includes teaching meditation for grief. I want to be very clear that you are learning how to teach meditation. And so that also really makes it important that you practice it, even if it's a few minutes a day. I fully believe that we should only practice what we teach, or teach what we practice. And you'll have a whole bunch of tools. I give you handouts, I give you scripts, I give you guided meditations and all of that. So I'm going to pop this up. I'm going to pop the link in the chat, and then I'm for the actual signing up, but then we're going to do Q&A. So yes, it's 12 weeks. And Diane asked, Are the sessions such as a lab or bonus sessions in addition to Friday? Great question. Why? Yes, there are. So here's what you would expect. There is about a half an hour of, and I might be understanding you, I might not be, but there's a half an hour of videos that you watch on your own each week. So you do that before the Friday class. And also each week, you're going to be doing a little bit of meditation practice on your own every day, a little bit of journaling practice on every day. And then you're going to practice with a buddy during the week. And whether that's a client you already have, or you have me pair you up with somebody in the group, you're going to be doing work outside of the Friday sessions. So you're doing a lot of your learning before, and that way Friday sessions is questions for Heather. We also do breakout rooms where you get to practice with other people in the group, and you get told what your homework is for the next week. Those are recorded. The most popular question in Heather's email is, what if I can't make the Friday session? It does get recorded and posted within 24 hours. And you can email me your question, or actually don't email me. When you're in the program, you have a direct message feature. We have a community with a community chat. You can message other people in the group, but most importantly, you can message me. And I always tell people, if it's a question that other people will benefit, such as, I have a client who's going through this, what would you do? Or where is this handout? Other people might benefit from that. So you'd post that in the community chat. If it's something personal, we had people go through things this last cohort. We had divorces. It was wild. It was like, it was extra practicum for people. And so people were reaching out to me for support with that. In fact, one of the things I do, because I know this work is very hard, hopefully nothing awful happens during the thing, but there was somebody who was surprised by what was happening in their life. I pushed them to the next cohort. I want you to be able to be fully present. So I do have guidelines and boundaries, but I'm also very kind and want people to be able to get the most out of this. I know you didn't ask about that, but I felt like sharing it. And I wanted to share that this next cohort starts next Friday, I believe it is. Is it next Friday? Really? Wow. Yes, it is. So 1 week from this Friday. And if you want to sign up, there are spaces left. And because I do book bonuses for the early bird, but if you sign up today, if you're like, yeah, this is for me, and this is just to piggyback on the energy of this, I'll send you my guided journal from grief to peace. So I'm going to go off screen and tell you more, answer questions and tell you more.